The title that I have chosen for the talk comes from Bertolt Brecht's motto to the poems which he wrote when he was in exile in Denmark. And again, as we all know, there is more, of course, to the four-line motto than these four words. Brecht's idea, it was not only that there'll be singing in dark times, but there will be singing about dark times, which is a more difficult thing to do. But still, it is important to concentrate on these four words to discover what kind of singing is done when singing is done. Particularly in our country, where so many social ages and artistic practices live together side by side. Here we find that much of the singing is not about dark times at all. The loudest songs, in fact, are often about how bright the times are. I remember Shubha Mudgal, who has been in the picture for thinking the times are dark. She signed the open letter with 48 other celebrities, and consequently, she, along with them, could be charged with sedition. To underline how divisive the times are in which we live, I'm going to return to 1999. That was the year Shubha Mudgal released an album of monsoon songs titled Ab Ke Sawan. One of her three lyricists for the album was Prasun Joshi, screenwriter, poet, advertising man, and now the chairperson, of the Central Board of Film Certification. So, what were the times like in 1999 that these two artists could make music together and happily? It was a time when the shock of December 6, 1992 had settled with many people into a grudging resignation to a future in which the RSS and BJP would have a loud say in national matters. But the face of the two organizations that we saw at the time was Atal Bihari Vajpayee's. It was a moderate, reasonable, conciliatory face. And although as PM, he failed to rein in his younger colleagues' supervision of the 2002 massacre in Gujarat, after only mildly reminding him of what Ram Rajya is. Artistic expression as such was not more adversely affected in those times than at any time previously. Nor had the word sedition entered the lexicon of public discourse. The social media revolution that allowed vicious trolls to roam free under assumed names was still 11 years away, and private satellite TV news channels were only 6 years old and neither partisan nor viciously belligerent. This was at least partly because Sri Vajpayee was not as interested as his successors have been in deepening existing social fault lines and ideological differences into chasms of hatred and division. This was the time when Mudgal and Joshi created music together. The content of the lyrics that Mudgal sang fell neatly into the traditional mold. They were about rain, the wet Junaria, drenched Tanaman, gathering ghata, and Pehli Barkha of the Pehla Pyar. This was familiar ground for Joshi, but for Mudgal, it constituted a rebellion. Because while the album catapulted her to the top of the popularity charts and she became a celebrity, in Mumbai's vibrant musical world, you heard a loud buzz of bigots who disapproved of her lively foray into indie pop. It had taken courage and a strong belief in pluralism to make that foray for her. Through the album, Mudgal had said loudly and clearly that music was music. No form was high, no form was low. Her lyricist, on the other hand, had made no such statement through his lyrics. So it comes as no surprise that today, when we are encouraged to look at each other with suspicion, and the safest bet is always to sing paeans of praise to the PM, Mudgal has been labeled seditious, and Joshi has become famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, as the obsequious interviewer of the nation's top honcho. In 2003, the year in which Habib Tanveer had been attacked in Madhya Pradesh, and 4 years after Mudgal had cocked a snook at the Hindustani music pundits, I attended the launch of a book which announced itself as a book of new bandishes. These bandishes were composed by one of our most loved and respected Hindustani classical vocalists. I bought the book eagerly because I had always felt that the Sahitya of Hindustani music needed to keep up with the times. I flipped through the pages only to find the usual suspects. The blue god, Radha, gopis filling water by the Yamuna, evil mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and the Pardesi who never returns home nor writes even 2 lines of a chithi to his lovelorn beloved. Different ragas, yes. Different beats, yes. But the same language and the same themes. Around the time when this book of new compositions was launched with much fanfare and admiration in the hermetic world of Hindustani music, Shubha Mudgal and Neela Bhagwat, both practitioners of Hindustani music, were singing the same song on different platforms and on different occasions. The song was Kabir's Sadho Dekho Jaga Baurana. For the author of the new bandishes, the world had obviously not gone mad. And if it had, it was none of her business to sing about it. That would be defiling the sacred space that she occupied. Her listeners, too, would have been shocked if she had dared disturb their peace with news of the outside world. They were the paying majority, invested with the power to dictate terms to the artist. The mutually agreed terms of engagement here were very simple. Tradition good, questioning bad. As Emily Dickinson says in her poem, short poem about the majority, "'Tis the majority, in this as all, prevails. Assent, and you are sane. Demur, you're straightway dangerous, and handled with a chain." T.M. Krishna has discovered the price of demurring. He has been barred from several platforms here and abroad. Krishna rang the first warning bell against the establishment of Carnatic music with his 560-page tome entitled A Southern Music, the Carnatic Story. It reminded me very much of Narayan Surve's poem addressed to the Marathi literary elite. And some of the lines go, "I am not alone. The age is with me too. Beware, the storm is about to break over you. I am a worker, a flashing sword. High literature, I am planning a crime against your word." Krishna's book challenges the total system of practice, performance, and consumption in which Carnatic music operates. In chapter after chapter, he shows its claustrophobic nature, managed and dominated by the Brahmin cultural elite. The caging of art, as he calls it, begins in the classroom, where students are taught that music that they are learning is not just music. It is Hindu, Brahmin music. On the concert platform, this music is seen as faith, and faith as music. Says Krishna scathingly, listening to Carnatic music is not mere exposure to the music. It is a complete Brahmin brainwashing package. The Brahmins of Chennai naturally bristled when the book was published. The singer, whom they had been used to speaking of as talented, had suddenly sprouted contrary opinions and needed to be chastised. Perhaps he was not a talented singer after all. Perhaps he was merely a charlatan looking for publicity. But what could this system do to an artist who was himself about to abandon it? In 2015, Krishna quit the December music season in Chennai, the platform on which other musicians from home and abroad vied to perform. His reasons for doing it struck me as similar to the ones that had made Badal Sarkar move from the proscenium stage to community halls and parks. Sarkar wanted to and did create a free, unticketed theatre that he could take directly to the people. His intent was political. It was to engage people in spaces where performers and audience were on one level, where theatre could be used to inform them of who their enemies were and how those enemies operated. Sarkar was doing what actually the revolutionary balladeer Sambhaji Bhagat had been singing all this while. इनसे ध्यान से देखो रे भाई, इनकी सूरत पहचानो रे भाई. 4 decades later, Krishna took Carnatic music to a fishing village. He won the Raymond Magsaysay Award in recognition of his forceful commitment as artist and advocate to art's power to heal India's deep social divisions. The Hindu right spewed venom once again. One of its many bloggers said, attempts by the likes of Krishna are divisive, and these attempts get awarded by agencies with an ulterior motive of seeing India divided and broken. This is a familiar tune. To say that an unjustly divided society is unjustly divided is to divide the nation. To actually divide the nation is to unite the nation. Unfortunately, the Magsaysay Award doesn't go to the dividers, even when they erect a monumental statue and call it Statue of Unity. In theatre, there was once Habib Tanveer, who ruffled the same feathers that Krishna has been ruffling. To the best of my knowledge, Krishna has so far not been physically attacked. Habib Saab was. We heard the same tune then that was played when Krishna won his award. Uma Bharati, in full support of the right-wing fanatics who were responsible for the attack, accused Tanveer of spreading communism through his plays, chiefly a folk play called Ponga Pandit. Now, how was a play supposed to be spreading communalism? By showing a Jamandarin outwitting a temple priest. How dare she not know her place? Was a simple question. Unfortunately, this concept of human rights has really put the time out of joint for the right. The trampled and the oppressed are no longer willing to just lie down and die. There is a documentary film titled 18 Feet, scripted, directed, and edited by a filmmaker, Ranjit Kusur. It is about a band of Dalit musicians in Kerala who are bringing back and popularizing the traditional songs of their community. The title of the film, 18 Feet, refers to the distance Dalits were expected to maintain from caste Hindus in order not to pollute them. The camera in this film is not Brahminical. It mingles with the musicians on stage, at home, during rituals, on terms of unforced equality and a warm kind of affection. In the process, it tells a counter story to the one told by the title of the film. While caste always gets brushed under the carpet today, it has shown up in many ways, nonetheless, in the lives of the band members. Caste is therefore never too far from their conversations with each other. Ramesh is a bus conductor, and he is the founder and co-founder and leader of this band. He is also the son of a man who was once bought by the local landlord, along with many other Dalits. Ramesh asks his father, how can anybody buy human beings as if they were inanimate objects? The father has a simple explanation. A landlord needs serfs to work on his land. A landlord has money, so he buys serfs. The father belongs to a generation that didn't ask questions. Ramesh asks many questions. Out of that questioning comes confidence. He tells the younger members of his band, black is strength. Don't deny who you are. Hold your head high and say you are a pariah. Now, Uma Bharati would approve of Ramesh's father, but she would call Ramesh divisive. Theatre in Maharashtra is riddled with those who believe that the times have at last passed from dark to bright. Unto us a son is born, and we shall be saved, they sing. After two incidents in Mumbai and Pune, designed to warn theatre people against transgression, Jayant Pawar, one of our leading playwrights and award-winning short fiction writer, wrote an open letter addressed to his colleagues and friends in theatre, condemning these events and inviting their reactions. The first instance that he recorded happened when Janam performed Tathagat at Harkal studio. The two CID cops apparently came there, took pictures of the set, made inquiries about Sudhanba, asked about the nature of the play, asked the manager of the studio why he had permitted such a performance to be staged at his venue, took pictures of people waiting in the queue to buy tickets, barged into the auditorium, stood at the door all through the play, and then left. The message, of course, was clear. You are suspects. We are watching you, so you better watch out. A similar message was sent in the second incident. The group Kissa Koti was scheduled to perform its play Ravidas Romeo and Juliet Devi. This was in Pune. Two policemen visited their hotel in the early hours of the morning looking for one Yash Khan, a member of the group. They examined his ID proof, wanted to know how the other members of the group knew him, searched through their belongings and their properties, and then left. They did not have a search warrant. As a result of this targeting, Pawar says in his open letter, an ordinary youngster who manages the backstage operations of a small theatre group, as well as his family, will forever live in terror. I asked Pawar how his colleagues had responded to his letter. He said, with silence. He then told me that when the 49 celebrities wrote their open letter to the PM, the actor, very famous, very fine actor, Shanta Gokhale's response to the open letter was to write an article which was titled, "They Should Be Soundly Thrashed." However, Gokhale was rather disturbed by Pawar's open letter and vowed to take it up immediately with the concerned minister. The concerned minister was the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. And so Gokhale fell into a judicious silence. Pawar, who comes from a textile mill background, has taken on the mafia of politicians, builders, corporates in his own work. He has felt empowered to do so, at least partly, I think, because he is a caste Hindu, and therefore not a born target of the right. This does not hold true for another very fine Marathi playwright director, Shafdar Khan. He is a Muslim and therefore fundamentally suspect. He has written a long article himself about the years when he fell silent, unable to write. He saw the world as sadho dekho jag bhavana, because what he was seeing was absurdities of a kind that had never been witnessed before. Leaders carrying swords, wearing crowns, riding automobiles covered into ruts. Says Khan in his article, when the Babri Masjid was demolished, my heart sank. I felt then the first intimations of something drastic and terrible about to happen. It depressed me to realize that I had not been aware enough of the rehearsals that had preceded this tragic show of burnings and killings that was being staged on Mumbai's streets. We had known riots earlier, but what was happening now was on a different scale altogether. I locked myself up at home and tried to write. I wrote in bits and pieces, but they would not cohere into a play. I found myself unable to write about what was happening outside and unable to write about anything else. As a result, I decided to give up writing. I simply stopped writing. It was only 3 years later, in 1995, that Khan saw a glimmer of hope for himself. He was persuaded by a director friend of his to do what he had been avoiding doing for all these years. He attended a play reading. Jis Lahore Nahi. Yes. And somehow listening to this play released all the knots in Khan's writing process. He began to write. He was writing his adaptation of Vajahat's play, which he called Rahile Dur Ghar Maase, My Home is left far behind. Now, artists have often suffered this kind of despair in dark times and have contemplated putting a full stop to their singing. Poets in particular have questioned the efficacy of their work when action rather than words seem to be called for. Often they have found reassurance in what other poets have said. Some poets have recorded their debt to the lines in W.H. Auden's tribute to Yeats. The lines which end the tribute are, "For poetry makes nothing happen. It survives. A way of happening, a mouth. Even to survive in dark times is to win. And a mouth that is ready to speak out is as important as hands that act." Brecht's poem, To Those Born Later, poses a similar question that troubles many of us in repressive times. What kinds of times are they when a talk about trees is almost a crime? Because it implies silence about so many horrors. But he himself answers the question in a poem called In Dark Times. The poem is very clever in the way it juxtaposes the lyric poet's usual themes of trees, children, rivers, women, with lines referring to the horrors of the time and referring to the future generations. He says at the end of the poem, they won't say times were dark, rather, why were the poets silent? In my Marathi novel, Tyavarchi, translated in English as Crowfall, I had wanted to explore how art responds to violent times. This novel was written 2 years after Gujarat happened. And there were two pieces of writing that guided me then. There was an article by an Iraqi ceramicist, Nuha al-Radi, and there was a poem by Matthew Arnold, Dover Beach. In her article, the Iraqi artist says that she had expected her very well-known book, Baghdad Diaries, to make some difference to the way America looked at her country and its citizens. But that didn't happen. America attacked Iraq once again. This time around, she says, she simply put her head down, did her work, hoped that she would survive the bombing, while in the meanwhile trying to preserve some shreds of humanity in herself. Dover Beach told me how this could be done, preserving one's own humanity. Arnold speaks of his despair at the ebbing of faith in the world. He means, of course, religious faith, but to me, it was faith in the principles of equality, liberty, brotherhood. The year in which I wrote the novel, as I said, was 2004, only 2 years after the Gujarat bloodbath. And the lines from Dover Beach that I related to more strongly were, our love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. And so, my novel revolves around a group of artist friends, unsentimental, truth-seeking, bound by mutual respect and affection, working out their individual ways to respond to the surrounding violence. However overwhelmed the writer is by despair, her choice can never be between whether to write or not. Perumal Murugan tried to stop writing, but could not help composing 40 poems during his self-imposed exile. Writers write because they must. They have no way of shedding their lifelong habit of working with words. So the question is not whether to write, but how to write, particularly when times are dark. One way perhaps is to strike the enemy from within. One of the cheekiest plays on the Marathi stage has done precisely that. In Maharashtra, the political party that has named itself after Shivaji, the warrior king, has ignored every other quality of that wise and generous ruler except his campaigns against Aurangzeb, and has turned them ahistorically into merely a Hindu-Muslim battle aimed at establishing a Hindu Rajya. 3 men from disparate backgrounds came together to write this play, which challenged this narrative, liberated Shivaji from his devotees' clutches. The play was called Shivaji Underground in Bhimnagar Mohalla. The 3 men who made the play were Sambhaji Bhagat, the Dalit activist and revolutionary balladeer, Rajkumar Tangre, a farmer from Jalna, one of Maharashtra's most backward districts, and Nandu Madhav, the actor who discovered Tangre when he saw a play of his on the state drama competition circuit. Name of the play was Akada, and it was about how farmers are compelled to steal power in order to survive, sometimes at the risk of their own lives. The play was performed also in near darkness to give us, the urban audience, a taste of what the play was saying. So, Shivaji Underground had a hilarious cover story about Yama having been sent down to earth to fetch Shivaji along with his ideas. But Shivaji forgets to bring his ideas. So he is allowed to go back to earth to get them after leaving his turban behind as surety. Shivaji hoodwinks Yama and goes underground in Bhimnagar. Yama comes down with the turban, looking for him. The turban he brings because it's a test of who Shivaji is. He goes around on the stage, occasionally trying the turban on various heads. It doesn't fit anybody at all. This forms a running gag through the play. The play ends with a Sawal-Jawab competition between the Dalit Shahir and the Shivaji Bhakt Party's Shahir. Both sides are supposed to sing Shivaji's praises. The Bhakts have nothing more to say than how brave he was, the battles he fought, and how the corn was plentiful and golden in his time. The Dalit Shahir, on the other hand, extols Shivaji's policies regarding women, caste, religion, agriculture, revenue. It is a contest between myth and history, in which the Bhimnagar Shahir wins hands down. On the day of the first show of the play, Sambhaji Bhagat and his boys were positioned outside the theatre, all set to face disruption by the police and or right-wing hoodlums. After all, the play was about Shivaji, the holiest of holy cows in Maharashtra. But nothing happened. Strategy had won. For who could object to a play in which Shivaji was lauded for virtues that nobody had ever heard of? A complex work of art stumps rightist regimes. Complexity requires subtle thinking. Thinking is not their strongest suit. Their way is to win by appealing to people's sentiment. And nothing is more sentimental than the idea of patriotism. Patriotism for us is love of the land, with no mention of love for its people. Love is then slyly turned into worship. Worship is made concrete with a symbol. This symbol is a goddess. She is white-skinned, wearing white or orange sari, bearing the national flag. With such a beautiful goddess to worship, what a divine thing patriotism becomes. It puts into your hands a powerful trishul to stab doubters with. Shaw said something scathing about patriotism in his play, O'Flaherty, V.C. He says, "You'll never have a quiet world till you knock the patriotism out of the human race." The play subverts the whole notion of courage in war by depicting the protagonist, O'Flaherty, as a slob of a soldier, more afraid of running away from the battlefield than staying and fighting. The battle of reason against unreason cannot be fought with simple answers. Artists repeatedly assert it is not their job to offer solutions, but to raise questions. The finest writers of the world also attempt to raise such questions as will allow their work to cross the boundaries of time and space and make sense to future generations. The Chilean playwright Ariel Dorfman wrote this harrowing play, Death and the Maiden. It was written a few years after Pinochet's rule had ended. During those 17 terrible years, Chileans had been mercilessly tortured and punished for the slightest hint of rebellious expression. Dorfman's protagonist, Paulina, has also been tortured and raped by a doctor. Only her husband knows about this. Although those dark times have passed, she is still gripped with fear. A man whose car has accidentally broken down comes to their door in the night seeking shelter. She hears his voice and is instantly convinced that he was her tormentor. Sentiment would require that she be allowed to have her revenge. People who have bayed for the blood of rapists in our country have been unable or unwilling to consider capital punishment in its larger implications. Dorfman stands back from this demand for revenge and looks at the problem in the context of his country's future. He makes Paulina's husband a lawyer in charge of investigating the deaths of dissidents under Pinochet's regime. The husband must therefore defend the man in his living room against his wife's anger and agony. Dorfman says in an article written on the occasion of the play's revival 20 years later in London, he says the husband had to do this because without the rule of law, the transition to democracy would be compromised. Then he adds, but one does not create such a transgressive play in a country which is still reeling from many years of pain without suffering the consequences oneself. My consequence was that my compatriots hated what I had written and revived it. Consequences come with transgressive action. Abhishek Majumdar's play, The Jinns of Edgar, is complex and layered, like all his plays are. But for the police who stopped its staging in Jaipur recently, its complexity was the artist's business. As far as they were concerned, his play was about not Kashmir alone, but the people of Kashmir. Now that was transgression, because he treated not just the people with sympathy, but to add insult to injury, he examines the attitude and actions of Indian security personnel in Kashmir. For this and other such transgressions, the Bengaluru police have prepared a dossier on him, and occasionally they call him in for a friendly chat. I once questioned Habib Saab about not providing solutions to the questions that he raised in his plays. His answer was, the moment you say things out clearly and produce answers, your audience says, thank you, nice evening, goes home, has dinner and sleeps. Also, there is no single answer to a question. If you incite them with a disturbing question, there may be more answers than you thought of. In street theatre, you take immediate problems and produce answers because the answers are there. But even street theatre can be artistic. Safdar Hashmi went back to street theatre to make his Nukkad Natak more stimulating, also to get his actors to give more rounded performances. He was a rare fellow, imaginative, open-minded, always ready to learn. He was the only person who wrote a sensitive critical appreciation of my play, Hirma Ki Amar Kahani. I asked Habib Saab about this problematic play, in which he seemed to suggest that feudalism was a good thing. He said, Safdar talked to me at length about this dilemma. He came on several evenings to watch the rehearsals and saw the show at least 3 times before he wrote about it. He said the play does present a dilemma with no solution. My dilemma was this, that democracy, though desirable, has a propensity to turn into fascism. And yet, democracy is more acceptable than dictatorship. But feudalism, no matter how condemnable and exploitative, has its own silver lining. It has supported the arts, not just classical, but folk arts. It can teach us something even about administration. So there is a dilemma, and I have left it at that in Hirma. I told Habib Saab that many artists in troubled times feel there is no point in writing poetry or fiction or plays. Artists wish that their work could be seen to change society, to make it worthwhile. In this context, I wanted to know from him if he felt his work had changed anything at all. He said yes and no. Art never changes society. It cannot be the vehicle of change. But art, particularly theatre, does something very precious. It paves the way for change. It affects opinions. It opens up minds. I think my work has had its effect in the sense that I have revived some dying arts and caused the ripples to spread. Finally, he had this to say about singing in dark times about dark times. He said, the worst society often produces the best of art. Art is always anti-establishment. It is like the Hilsa of Dhaka. The Bangladeshis are proud of theirs. They say it is better than the Hooghly Hilsa. I asked them why. It's the same Hilsa. They say no, the Hooghly Hilsa goes with the current. Ours goes against the current. So it is tougher and sweeter. Art goes against the current to flourish. At this point, he took a light drag on his pipe and said very thoughtfully, you almost wish for bad times if you want art to flourish. Thank you.